Hello, welcome. I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the new moon in Cancer, which takes place on the 10th of July. But of course, I'm going to be talking about the setting that new moon is in, which means what else is going on in the cosmos, what other alignments are in play, because that all makes a huge difference. Now, this new moon in Cancer is there for all of us. It's going to mean something for each one of us, regardless of our sun sign. Now, another thing is that every new moon is different from the one before it, new moon in Cancer, because, of course, it's making different connections to the all-important planets, especially the outer planets, and that makes for differences every time. There is, of course, a sort of common theme to the idea of a new moon in Cancer. All new moons are about new beginnings, and in whatever sign they are, it's always good at new moon to think about taking up a new activity, doing something in a new way, and to consciously connect with the idea that you need to start new phases, and it's good to get into, well, good to have new beginnings. And when we work with the astrology, we go with the current as opposed to fighting it. It's always much, much better. I think that kind of approach to astrology is a lot healthier than sort of sitting back, waiting for someone to tell you what's happening and what it means. Part of it, in many ways, you are your own explorer of your chart and astrology. And just to know that the new moon in Cancer is occurring and to make sort of, I don't necessarily mean you have to make notes, but just to observe the things that happen around the time of the new moon for you and perhaps for other members of your family. Life out there on the world stage is always very educational. When we look at the sign of Cancer, and we think about what aspects of life Cancer rules, and we're thinking about things to do with children, to do with care, to do with nurture. So we could be thinking of things to do with the care services, particularly childcare. We're looking at pregnancy and childbirth, procreativity, but also things to do with the housing industry, home, things to do with your own home. And of course, also we think about the homeland. Not every country calls it the homeland, it's the fatherland, the motherland. You know, there's all sorts of different names that we give to our nation. But the idea of the motherland, of the homeland, is particularly feminine, isn't it? And so countries that tend to identify with homeland in the sense of the motherland are probably also the countries that probably come a little bit more into significance at this time. And of course, I'm thinking in particular of America, which is a Cancerian country. And here we have a new moon in Cancer. So this is a pretty important new moon for America. Now, Cancer is also a water sign. And whenever we think about the element of water, we're in the area of feelings and intuitions and instincts. So we could say that at a new moon in Cancer, we're all a little bit more attuned to our instincts and intuitions and our feeling selves, and that we operate from our feeling center as opposed perhaps to our mental center. We think how we feel about situations rather than what is a situation telling us is how we feel about it. Now, in many ways, of course, if you've got the sun or the moon in Cancer, this new moon is going to be a little bit more important for you. And as I said, you know, this idea of new beginnings and taking up new interests, new things happening around the time of the new moon are going to be particularly important if you do have the sun or moon in Cancer. But it's also very important for the other cardinal signs. So we're looking at Capricorn, Aries, and Libra. And the reason why is that in your solar chart, this new moon is taking place in one of the cardinal houses. And the cardinal houses are dynamic. They're a little bit more powerful. So for instance, for Cancer per se, to have the new moon in your first house is all about you personally. So it's a new personal cycle beginning for you. And it is a period when you're much more likely to feel much more strongly about certain situations. And in many ways, when you've got the emotional power behind you, you can be more effective. And it may also mean, of course, because this is the relationship axis, the new moon in the first house, the opposite side begins the relationship area. And so we could be looking at things to do with relationships here as well. And maybe a new cycle beginning for a relationship, even a new relationship. Now for Capricorn, that really is much more obvious because the new moon for you is in the 7th house of relationships. Definitely a new cycle beginning for working relationships, maybe even for signing contracts with companies, things like that, because you're beginning a new relationship or a new commitment with a company, with an individual. But of course, it can also mean a new beginning for a long-standing relationship, a romantic relationship, something like a marriage. And of course, it can also mean the beginning of a new emotional relationship. For Aries and Libra, the other two cardinal signs, we're on that life direction axis again. For Aries, the new moon is in the 4th house of home and family. A new home may be, more likely, a kind of new cycle for family life. It may be that you've got a new member of the family to welcome in, whether by birth or by marriage, and new things happening on the home, maybe a new sofa, or maybe even some kind of move or much more dramatic change on the home front. But let's not forget that this also begins a new cycle for family life. And as I'm going to be talking about when I get to the end of this video, it is time to kind of have a look at what's going on in the family and thinking, you know what? We need a new start. Now for Libra, this new moon is in the 10th house. So we're in the area of life direction in the sense of career. It's your place in the world. So it's out there, social life, things that define you as a member of the world, if you like. So it could be some important gatherings and events that you'll be attending, or it could be perhaps a new job, or maybe even a new part of an existing job. But it's good to kind of consciously tune into the idea that new beginnings in this area of life, your place in the world, is important. And the more consciously we connect with the astrology, the more effective I think we are. We live our charts better. So now what I want to do is have a look at this new moon in the context of the other planetary goings on. And so for that, I want to take a look at the chart. Now, as you'll see, I've set this chart for Baku in Azerbaijan for the main reason being that I wanted to be able to see in the horoscopic circle the new moon rising, which is what's happening here. The sun and the moon just under that horizontal arrow, the horizon, the ascendant descendant axis, we can really see how that new moon looks. And let's not forget that at the moment of the new moon, the moment we get to 18 degrees and 2 minutes of Cancer, we won't be able to see the new moon at all. It's only as it begins to wax in the next sort of 48 hours that we start to see that little slither that says, oh, look, a new moon. And by that time, the moon will be in Leo. And in fact, that's going to mean something very important, which I'm going to get to shortly. For now, I want to look at that new moon, and I want to show you that it is linked to the planet Neptune, which is up at the very top of the chart by the vertical arrow at the top. That little trident image is Neptune, because this new moon is trining Neptune. It's an angle of great harmony. And what I'd like to think about this new moon in trine to Neptune means it evokes compassion in all of us. Our compassion is evoked. And you know, when we have understanding and empathy, things are much more, well, I think that's, you know, when we feel empathy for people, when we can connect to a situation and feel for the people involved in it, it makes us a richer kind of people. And hopefully we're going to see some of those things, some movements in certain situations, global situations, where we see operations to save people, to help people, to show our charity and compassion. But there's something else that's also rather important about planet Neptune up there, and that's its relationship to Mercury, which, as you look at the horoscopic circle, is just sort of in between 9 and 10 o'clock position. Now, Mercury will be in square 90 degrees away from Neptune a few days before the new moon. It's actually making its contact on the 6th of July. And in general, when we have Mercury-Neptune connections, things are very foggy. They're not literally foggy, although they might be in some areas of the world. You might have a lot of mist, but really we're talking metaphors here. Things aren't very clear. Whatever is going on is not, clarity isn't great. And of course, we always have to be very aware of what we're doing on a Mercury-Neptune square, because we can make terrible missteps and misunderstandings can occur. But why I really want to look at this particular Mercury-Neptune square is because it's the third time it's happening. And we're, that phrase, third time's a charm, third time lucky. Well, maybe it has its origin in the idea that some planets move forward, they turn retrograde, they come back again over the same ground. And by the time it's the third time, that's it, it's over. So technically, we need to go back to the 21st of May for when a situation may have had its origins. I mean, to think back, what happened around that time? Was it significant? Try to think about that particular day. Then we come again to the 5th of June, which is a little bit more recent because Mercury was retrograde then. Could there have been a second stage of this particular situation or development? Because on the 6th of July, we'll have it back again. And this time it's like done and dusted, over, out, end of the story. Now, I did a little bit of research before I started this video. And on the 21st of May, if you go back to that time, the big news story of that time was the Diana interview on Panorama. And it was the scandal of Martin Bashir, the interviewer, who had used, he made a fraudulent bank statement as part of his approach to get the interview, or so it is said. And of course, that was, it's a felony. But on the 21st of May, Prince William came out and spoke very heartfully about the situation and the BBC's fault in it all. And so did Lord Spencer, Diana's brother. So we have a kind of, at that time, there was a very big royal story in the news. And then by great coincidence, or as we astrologers might think, Mercury, Neptune knocking on the door again, on the 5th of June, what pops up then? We have the whole Lilibet fandango. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex had just welcomed their new daughter into the world and called her Lilibet. And of course, that is the Queen's pet name. And it appeared, depending on who you believe, that they hadn't actually asked permission to call their daughter Lilibet. So there was a bit of a scandal in royal circles again then. So, hey presto, here we come to the 6th of July and the final Mercury-Neptune square in this little cycle. And there's probably going to be a royal story again in the news. And let's not forget that only a few days earlier, Princess Diana would have celebrated her 60th birthday. So there are a lot of special events taking place at that time. And of course, she will be in the news. And maybe, of course, when that happens, all sorts of other things come crawling out from under the stonework. And so we can be fairly sure that this Mercury-Neptune cycle had a lot to do with royal things. But of course, in your life, it may have something entirely different. So let me come back and have a look at that chart again, because there is also two more things I want to look at. If you go back to where the sun and moon are again. If you go right to the opposite point in the chart, the kind of 3 o'clock position, you'll find the symbol of Pluto. So this new moon is opposing Pluto. Now, it isn't exact, it won't be exact, at least the sun won't be opposed to Pluto until the 17th of July. But nonetheless, the new moon is within range of that. And that means there's a lot of profound feelings and exchanges and developments going on around that time. Again, whether we see them out there in the world or whether in our own lives, the things that are going on are touching us at a very, very deep level. Pluto is the principle of elimination and transformation. So there could be a lot of personal change for all of us at this time. And as I say, I'm going to come back at the very end and talk about shifting oppositions on things. And that Sun-Pluto opposition, while being quite turbulent in some ways, does serve a great purpose as it exposes things at their very core. And sometimes we need that in order to heal and grow and go forward. I also want to look at this triangle that I've got pictured there. We've got Venus and Mars in the sort of 8 o'clock position, opposed to Saturn over there about 2:30. And the apex of that opposition is Uranus, somewhere around about 11 o'clock. Now, this is a theme that has been playing all year, and I have talked a lot about it on my videos and on my audios too. I talk about this Saturn-Uranus dynamic as ending old patterns and bringing or setting the stage for new ones. And we see this going on all over the place in governments. We see it in the things that are, again, always in the news. And we see it in our own lives, that things have changed irrevocably. We can't go back there. But I've also looked at this dynamic as a very important way of looking at Saturn in the sense of responsibility and owning situations. You know, Saturn is the planet of karma, and, you know, actions have consequences. So when we look at Saturn in this regard, we need to take on board that idea of taking responsibility for our actions. And when we look at the Uranus dynamic with that, Uranus representing freedom, liberation, revolution, it's through taking accountability that we gain our liberation. That's a very, very powerful theme playing for all of us. And again, this is a good thing to keep in our minds consciously. So to come back and have a look at this triangle, we've got Venus and Mars opposing Saturn, squaring Uranus. Now, this will all take place between the 1st and sort of 8th of July. And of course, the new moon often empowers situations and brings things into the forum as well. But let's just think about the 1st to 8th of July, which of course covers that all-important period of Independence Day. And I've been talking about that, certainly talked about it in my previous video. So this is quite a powerful period. It involves a lot of change, a lot of, I've talked about protest. And I mean, we protest things in our own lives when things are unfair, that we feel this shouldn't be happening because I didn't ask for it, I didn't want it. So that dynamic is very powerful around the beginning of July and just up to shortly before the new moon. And what I want to draw your attention to is, if you look around the circle, I've written there just outside the circle, the 11th of July. And that is the symbol for the moon in Leo. In other words, the moon is going to pass over that Mars-Venus conjunction and oppose Saturn. So it brings it to life. So the 11th, 12th of July are going to be important days for many of you, because the potential in that T-square is going to be brought to life, especially, I suspect, if you have a lot of Leo in your chart. If we move round where I've written the 17th of July, you'll find the moon, no, it's the 18th of July, I apologize, 18th of July. You'll find the moon in Scorpio. Again, this now will form a T-square with all of this. And if we come to the 24th of July, very end of the month, there'll be a full moon which will be a little far away from this particular configuration. But my goodness, it's going to pass over Saturn and trigger Neptune again. So we do have another replay of things. Again, Aquarians in the center of all of that activity. If we look back a bit to the 4th of July itself, Independence Day, there is the moon in Taurus on that Uranus, bringing out the full effects of that T-square. So that's why I consider this as a very kind of unsettled period for the globe, but particularly for America. And one of the recommendations I would give, I mean, if you have celebrations going on at that time, keep them close to home rather than traveling or getting out with loads and loads of crowds, because that's not a good kind of alignment to have when there are a lot of people around. So it's just a little tip from your astrologer here. So let me come back into the room again and sort of come, I suppose, to some of the themes that we've been talking about in this video. And I mentioned a couple of times the new moon in Cancer, the sign of Cancer. It's a very powerful sign. It's a cardinal sign. And people often forget that Cancer is a cardinal sign. They think of it as water and always as sensitive, intuitive, which it is. But by saying that, it means it isn't in the forefront of things. But cardinal means ambitious and achieving and self-motivated. And that's Cancer is why Cancer is such a powerful sign, because of its emotional content to that sort of principle of high achieving and everything that I've just said. But one of the things about Cancer, and this always makes me smile, and I do mention it sometimes in my writing, and it's one of the first things I learned myself about Cancer. And I remember somebody saying it to me: Cancerians never forget where they buried the hatchet. And of course, Cancerians are meant to have memories like elephants. They remember everything. And of course, the fact that it's water means that you store those memories in your feeling center. And of course, Cancer rules the stomach. So we have this idea that you store your feelings in your tummy. And that's why you get tummy upsets and all those things that happen. And in fact, I'm not sure where I read this, so maybe you should look into it yourself. But I did find out that the cells that are in the stomach are ultra sensitive, and it's almost as though they pick up nuances and vibes, you know, from out there. And this is another reason why we get feelings in our tummies about things. So let me come back to the idea of Cancerians never forgetting this new moon, which is for us all, the new moon in Cancer. And remember, that's opposing Pluto and trining, excuse me, and trining Neptune, which is an added layer of nuance onto this new moon. And it's about feuds. It's about family feuds. And I talked a little bit about the royal family and this Mercury-Neptune square synchronizing with, you know, information, news, developments for the British royal family. And one of the things that's going on in that family at the moment is a very, very big family upset. And probably members of the family aren't talking to each other and feeling very, very sore about it all. And in every family, there's probably something that's grating away and making us not feel very happy. So this new moon in Cancer is an opportunity to bury the hatchet without remembering where we've buried it, to actually bury it, get over it. I know from my work with clients and in psychotherapy that we can't always fix things, no matter how much we analyze things, no matter how much we work through a process, we go through a trauma we've had or an upset, or even on a day-to-day experience with our partners, things that aren't fully resolved in the relationship, and they come up endlessly and they're never resolved. And I think sometimes you can't resolve things, and the only thing you can do is say, okay, that's it. Let's move on. We can't do any more work trying to process it. You know, we're never going to see eye to eye. We can't really fix this. What we can do is move forward. And as we keep moving forward, gradually, a new phase of our family life or whatever it may be can begin. And I think this is really my sort of end message I want to leave you with this time, is this idea: if you can't fix it, especially a family upset or family things, partnership things, things that affect your emotions, you have to say, enough's enough. Let's move on. Let's move forward and get to a new place. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. It all helps. And I look forward to speaking to you again in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.